Welcome back, children. So we'll pick up from where we left off when Bruce is confronted by Trunchbull in regards to the chocolate cake. Now then, Bogtrotter, the Trunchbull boomed, tell Cook what you think of a chocolate cake. Very good, the boy mumbled. You could see he was now beginning to wonder what all this was leading up to. The only thing he knew for certain was that the law forbade the Trunchbull to hit him with the riding crop that she kept smacking against her thigh. That was some comfort, but not much, because the Trunchbull was totally unpredictable. One never knew what she was going to do next. There you are, Cook, the Trunchbull cried. Bogtrotter likes your cake. He adores your cake. Do you have any more of your cake you could give him? I do indeed, the cook said. She seemed to have learnt her lines by heart. Then go and get it, and bring a knife to cut it with. The cook disappeared. Almost at once she was back again, staggering under the weight of an enormous round chocolate cake on a china platter. The cake was fully 18 inches in diameter, and it was covered with dark brown chocolate icing. Put it on the table, the Trunchbull said. There was a small table centre stage with a chair behind it. The cook placed the cake carefully on the table. Sit down, Bogtrotter, the Trunchbull said. Sit there. The boy moved cautiously to the table and sat down. He stared at the gigantic cake. There you are, Bogtrotter, the Trunchbull said, and once again her voice became soft, persuasive, even gentle. It's all for you, every bit of it, as you enjoyed that slice you had yesterday so very much. I ordered cook to bake you an extra large one, all for yourself. Why, thank you, the boy said, totally bemused. Thank cook, not me, the Trunchbull said. Thank you, cook, the boy said. The cook stood there like a shriveled bootlace, tight-lipped, implacable, disapproving. She looked as though her mouth was full of lemon juice. Come on, then, the Trunchbull said. Why don't you cut yourself a nice thick slice and try it? What, now? The boy said, cautious. He knew there was a catch in there somewhere, but he wasn't sure where. Can't I take it home instead? He asked. That would be impolite, the Trunchbull said, with a crafty grin. You must show Cookie here how grateful you are for all the trouble she's taken. The boy didn't move. Come on, get on with it, the Trunchbull said. Cut a slice and taste it. We haven't got all day. The boy picked up the knife and was about to cut into the cake when he stopped. He stared at the cake, then he looked up at the Trunchbull, then at the tall, stringy cook with her lemon juice mouth. All the children were watching tensely, waiting for something to happen. They felt certain it must. The Trunchbull was not a person who would give someone a whole chocolate cake to eat just out of kindness. Many were guessing that it had been filled with pepper or castor oil or some other foul-tasting substance that would make the boy violently sick. It might even be arsenic and he would be dead in 10 seconds flat. Or perhaps it was a booby-trapped cake and the whole thing would blow up the moment it was cut, taking Bruce Bogtrotter with it. No one in the school put it past the Trunchbull to do any of those things. I don't want to eat it, the boy said. Taste it, you little brats, the Trunchbull said, insulting the cook. Very gingerly, the boy began to cut a thin slice of the vast cake. Then he levered the slice out. Then he put the knife down and took the sticky thing in his fingers and started very slowly to eat it. It's good, isn't it? The Trunchbull asked. Very good, the boy said, chewing and swallowing. He finished the slice. Have another, the Trunchbull said. That's enough, thank you, the boy murmured. I said, have another, the Trunchbull said, and now there was an altogether sharper edge to her voice. Eat another slice. Do as you're told. I don't want another slice, the boy said. Suddenly the Trunchbull exploded. Eat, she shouted, banging her thigh with the riding crop. If I tell you to eat, you will eat. You wanted cake, you stole the cake, and now you've got cake. What's more, you're going to eat it. You do not leave this platform, and nobody leaves this hall until you've eaten the entire cake that is sitting there in front of you. Do I make myself clear, Bogtrotter? Do you get my meaning? The boy looked at Trunchbull. Then he looked down at the enormous cake. Eat, 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 the Trunchbull was yelling. Very slowly the boy cut himself another slice and began to eat it. Matilda was fascinated. Do you think he can do it? She whispered to Lavender. No, Lavender whispered. It's impossible. He'd be sick before he was halfway through. The boy kept going. When he had finished the second slice, he looked at the Trunchbull, hesitating. Eat, she shouted. Greedy little thieves who like to eat cake must have cake. Eat faster, boy, eat faster. We don't want to be here all day. And don't stop like you're doing now. Next time you stop before it's all finished, you go straight into the chokey, and I shall lock the door and throw the key down the well. The boy cut a third slice and started to eat it. He finished this one quicker than the other two. and when that was done, he immediately picked up the knife and cut the next slice. In some peculiar way, he seemed to be getting into his stride. Matilda, watching closely, saw no signs of distress in the boy yet. If anything, he seemed to be gathering confidence as he went on. He's doing well, she whispered to Lavender. He'll be sick soon, Lavender whispered back. It's going to be horrid. When Bruce Bogshot had eaten his way through half the entire enormous cake, he paused for just a couple of seconds and took several deep breaths. The Trunchbull stood with hands on hips, glaring at him. Get on with it, she shouted. Eat it up. Suddenly, the boy let out a gigantic belch which rolled around the assembly hall like thunder. Many of the audience began to giggle. Silence, shouted the Trunchbull. The boy cut himself another thick slice and started eating it fast. There were still no signs of flagging or giving up. He certainly did not look as though he was about to stop and cry out, I can't eat any more. I'm going to be sick. He was still in there running, and now a subtle change was coming over the 250 children watching in the audience. Earlier on, they had sensed impending disaster. They prepared themselves for an unpleasant scene in which the wretched boy, stuffed to the gills with chocolate cake, would have to surrender and beg for mercy, and then they would have watched the triumphant Trunchbull forcing more and still more cake into the mouth of the gasping boy. Not a bit of it. Bruce Bogtrotter was three-quarters of the way through and still going strong. One said that he was almost beginning to enjoy himself. He had a mountain to climb, and he was jolly well going to reach the top or die in his attempt. What is more, he had now become very conscious of his audience, and of how they were all silently rooting for him. This was nothing less than a battle between him and the mighty Trunchbull. Suddenly someone shouted, Come on, Brucey, you can make it. The Trunchbull wheeled around and yelled, Silence! The audience watched intently. They were thoroughly caught up in the contest. They were longing to stop cheering, but they didn't dare. I think he's going to make it, Matilda whispered. I think so too, Lavender whispered back. I wouldn't have believed anyone in the world could eat a whole cake of that size. The Trunchbull doesn't believe it either, Matilda whispered. Look at her, she's turning redder and redder. She's going to kill him if he wins. The boy was slowing down now. There was no doubt about that, but he kept pushing the stuff into his mouth with the dogged perseverance of a long-distance runner who has sighted the finish line and knows he must keep going. As the very last mouthful disappeared, a tremendous cheer rose up from the audience, and the children were leaping onto their chairs and yelling and clapping and shouting, Well done, Brucey! Good for you, Brucey! You've won a gold medal, Brucey! The Trunchbull stood motionless on the platform. Her great horsey face had turned the colour of molten lava, and her eyes were glittering with fury. She glared at Boris Bogtrotter, who was sitting on his chair like some huge overstuffed grub, replete, comatose, unable to move or to speak. A fine sweat was beading his forehead, but there was a grin of triumph on his face. Suddenly the Trunchbull lunged forward and grabbed the large empty china platter on which the cake had rested. She raised it high in the air and brought it down with a crash right on top of the wretched Bruce Bogtrotter's head, and pieces flew all over the platform. The boy was by now so full of cake he was like a sack full of wet cement, and you couldn't have hurt him with a sledgehammer. He simply shook his head a few times and went on grinning. Go to the blazes, screamed the Trunchbull, and she marched off the platform, followed closely by the cook. Lavender. In the middle of the first week of Matilda's first term, Miss Honey said to the class, I have some important news for you, so listen carefully. You too, Matilda. Put that book down for a moment and pay attention. Small, eager faces looked up and listened. It is the headmistress' custom, Miss Honey went on, to take over the class for one period each week. She does this with every class in the school, and each class has a fixed day and a fixed time. Ours is always 2 o'clock on Thursday afternoons, immediately after lunch. So tomorrow at 2 o'clock, Miss Trunchbull will be taking over for me for one lesson. I will be here as well, of course, but only as a silent witness. Is that understood? Yes, Miss Honey, they chirped. A word of warning to you all, Miss Honey said. The headmistress is very strict about everything. Make sure your clothes are clean, your faces are clean, and your hands are clean. Speak only when spoken to. When she asks you a question, stand up at once before you answer it. Never argue with her. Never answer back. Never try to be funny. If you do, you will make her angry. And when the headmistress gets angry, you had better watch out. You can say that again, Lavender murmured. I am quite sure, Miss Honey said, that she will be testing you on what you are meant to have learnt this week, which is your two times table. So I strongly advise you to swat it up when you get home tonight. Get your mother or father to hear you on it. What else will she test us on? Somebody asked. Spelling, Miss Honey said. Try to remember everything you have learnt these last few days. And one more thing. A jug of water and a glass must always be on the table here when the headmistress comes in. She never takes a lesson without that. Now, who will be responsible for seeing that it's there?" "I will," Lavender said at once. "Very well, Lavender," Mr. Honey said. "It will be your job to go to the kitchen and get the jug and fill it with water and put it on the table here with a clean, empty glass just before the lesson starts." "What if the jug's not in the kitchen?" Lavender asked. "There are a dozen headmistresses' jugs and glasses in the kitchen," Miss Honey said. "They are used all over the school." "I won't forget," Lavender said. "I promise I won't." Already Lavender's scheming mind was going over the possibility that this water jug job had opened up for her. She longed to do something truly heroic. She admired the older girl Hortensia to distraction for the daring deed she had performed in the school. She also admired Matilda, who had sworn to secrecy about the parrot job she had brought off her home, and also the great hair oil switch which had bleached her father's hair. It was her turn now to become a heroine, if only she could come up with a brilliant plot. On the way home from school that afternoon she began to mull over the various possibilities, and when at last the germ of a brilliant idea hit her, she began to expand on it and lay her plans with the same kind of care the Duke of Wellington had done before the Battle of Waterloo. Admittedly, the enemy on this occasion was not Napoleon, but he could never have got anyone at Crincham Hall to admit that the headmistress was less a formidable foe than the famous Frenchman. Great skill would have to be exercised, Lavender told herself, and great secrecy observed if she was to come out of this exploit alive. There was a muddy pond at the bottom of Lavender's garden, and this was the home of a colony of newts. The newt, although fairly common in English ponds, is not often seen by ordinary people because it is a shy and murky creature. It is an incredibly ugly, gruesome-looking animal, rather like a baby crocodile but with a shorter head. It is quite harmless but doesn't look it. It's about 6 inches long and very slimy, with a greenish-grey skin on top and an orange-coloured belly underneath. It is in fact an amphibian which can live in or out of the water. That evening Lavender went to the bottom of the garden, determined to catch a newt. They are swiftly moving animals and not easy to get hold of. She lay on the bank for a long time, waiting patiently until she spotted a whopper. Then, using her school hat as a net, she swooped and caught it. She had lined a pencil box with pondweed ready to receive the creature, but she discovered that it was not easy to get the newt out of the hat and into the pencil box. It squirmed like quicksilver, and apart from that the box was only just long enough to take it. When she did get it in at last she had to be careful not to trap its tail in the lid when she slid it closed. A boy next door called Rupert Entwistle had told her that if you chopped off a newt's tail, the tail stayed alive and grew into another newt 10 times bigger than the first one. It could be the size of an alligator. Lavender didn't quite believe that, but she was not prepared to risk it happening. Eventually she managed to slide the lid off the pencil box right home, and the newt was hers. Then, on second thoughts, she opened the lid just a tiny fraction so that the creature could breathe. The next day she carried a secret weapon to school in a satchel. She was tingling with excitement. She was longing to tell Matilda about her plan of battle. In fact, she wanted to tell the whole class, but she finally decided not to tell anyone. That it was better that way, because then no one, even when put under the most severe torture, would be able to name her as the culprit. Lunchtime came. Today it was sausages and baked beans, Lavender's favourite, but she couldn't eat it. "Are you feeling all right, Lavender?" Miss Honey asked from the head of the table. "I had such a huge breakfast," Lavender said. "I really couldn't eat a thing." Immediately after lunch she dashed off to the kitchen and found one of Trunchbull's famous jugs. It was a large bulging thing made out of blue glazed pottery. Lavender filled it half full of water and carried it together with the glass in the classroom and set it on the teacher's table. The classroom was still empty. Quick as a flash, Lavender got her pencil box from her satchel and slid open the lid just a tiny bit. The newt was lying quite still. With great care she held the box over the neck of the jug and pulled the lid fully open and tipped the newt in. There was a plop as it landed in the water. Then it thrashed around wildly for a few seconds before settling down. And now, to make the newt feel more at home, Lavender decided to give all the pondweed from the pencil box as well. The deed was done. All was ready. Lavender put her pencils back into the rather damp pencil box and returned it to its correct place on her own desk. Then she went out and joined the others in the playground until it was time for the lesson to begin. Right, we'll end it there because it's nearly the end of that page and we're running out of time. So join me next week and we shall continue on with this in week 4. Hope you enjoyed today's reading.